Sarah Chun had perfected the art of invisibility long before she stepped foot on Fort Bragg. At 27, she possessed the kind of unremarkable appearance that allowed her to blend into any crowd average height, understated build with straight black hair that she kept pulled back in a practical bun. Her civilian clothes hung loosely on her frame, chosen more for function than form, and she moved with an economy of motion that suggested efficiency rather than strength. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The North Carolina heat was already oppressive at 7 in the morning when she approached the main gate of the Special Operations Command Training Facility. The guard barely glanced at her identification before waving her through, his attention already shifting to the more impressive-looking candidates, arriving in expensive cars and military-issued vehicles. Sarah drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dented bumper and a radio that only worked on AM stations. She parked in the visitor section, gathered her single duffel bag, and walked toward the orientation building where dozens of other candidates were already gathering. The Advanced Tactical Leadership Program drew applicants from across the military spectrum: Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Marine Force Recon, Air Force Special Operations. Each candidate represented the elite of their respective branches, handpicked for a program that would theoretically produce the next generation of special operations commanders. Sarah's paperwork had arrived through channels that most of the other candidates had never heard of. While they could trace their selection back through clear organizational hierarchies, her orders came with classification levels that made even the program administrators uncomfortable. When pressed for details about her background, the only response was a terse notation: civilian contractor with relevant experience. The orientation hall buzzed with the kind of energy that comes from putting highly competitive individuals in the same space. Conversations centered around previous deployments, specialized training, and operational achievements. Sarah found a seat in the back corner and opened a well-worn notebook, the same one she'd carried through 3 different continents and more classified operations than she cared to remember. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Washington stepped to the podium with the bearing of a man who had earned his authority through decades of exemplary service. His uniform was immaculate, his bearing perfect, and his reputation preceded him through every special operations community. Washington had personally led more successful missions than most officers even knew existed, and his selection to run this program represented the Pentagon's commitment to producing leaders of unprecedented capability. "Ladies and gentlemen," Washington began, his voice carrying easily across the packed auditorium, "you are here because someone in the chain of command believes you have the potential to lead the most elite units in the American military. Over the next 8 weeks, we will determine whether that belief is justified." Sarah listened with the same focused attention she'd applied to countless briefings, but part of her mind was already cataloging the other candidates. The woman 3 rows ahead with the perfectly maintained Marine dress uniform and the bearing that suggested she'd never met a challenge she couldn't overcome. The Army Ranger captain near the front, whose sleeve tattoos were visible even through his dress shirt, each one marking a deployment or achievement that had earned him recognition throughout the special operations community. Then there was Captain Derek Morrison, a Navy SEAL whose reputation had preceded him to the program by several months. Morrison was the kind of operator who attracted attention wherever he went. 6 feet 2 inches of muscle and confidence, with the kind of square jaw and steady gaze that seemed designed for recruitment posters. His dress whites were tailored to perfection, and he carried himself with the assurance that comes from knowing that everyone in the room had heard of your accomplishments. "The selection process," Washington continued, "will evaluate not just your tactical knowledge or physical capabilities, but your judgment under pressure, your ability to lead diverse teams, and your capacity to make decisions when lives hang in the balance. Some of you will exceed our expectations. Others will discover that previous success does not guarantee future performance. Sarah made notes in her typical fashion: minimal text, maximum information density. Her handwriting was small and precise, covering concepts that most people would need paragraphs to explain. The notebook itself showed signs of extensive use, with pages marked by water stains and dust that suggested it had seen environments far removed from comfortable briefing rooms. During the break that followed Washington's opening remarks, the natural sorting began. Candidates gravitated toward others from their own branches or with similar backgrounds. Conversations quickly turned to comparing credentials and establishing informal hierarchies based on operational experience and reputation. Morrison found himself at the center of one such group, regaling other candidates with carefully edited stories from his most recent deployment. His audience was appropriately impressed. He had the kind of operational resume that made other special operations personnel take notice. 3 Bronze Stars, a Silver Star, and commendations from joint operations that had required the kind of skills that took years to develop. The thing about maritime operations, Morrison was saying, his voice carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most accomplished person in the room, is that you can't rely on backup if things go wrong. When you're 40 miles offshore in hostile territory, you either complete the mission or you don't come home. Sarah overheard the conversation from her position near the coffee station, where she was methodically preparing tea with the same precise movements she applied to everything else. Morrison's stories were impressive, and more importantly, they were true. She recognized several of the operations he referenced, though her knowledge came from sources that weren't discussed in polite conversation. The first formal evaluation began that afternoon with psychological assessments designed to measure decision-making under stress. Candidates were presented with scenarios that had no clear right answers, situations where any choice would result in casualties or mission failure. The goal was to understand how each person processed impossible decisions and whether they could maintain operational effectiveness when confronted with moral ambiguity. Sarah approached these tests with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else. Her responses were concise, practical, and demonstrated an understanding of tactical realities that surprised the evaluators. While other candidates struggled with scenarios involving civilian casualties or resource limitations, her answers showed a familiarity with such decisions that suggested real-world experience rather than theoretical knowledge. The physical assessments that followed were more straightforward but equally revealing. The program required capabilities that went beyond basic military fitness: advanced marksmanship, close quarters combat, tactical driving, and emergency medical procedures. Each skill was tested at levels that would challenge even elite operators. Morrison excelled in every category, his performance drawing attention from instructors and candidates alike. His marksmanship scores were exceptional, his hand-to-hand combat demonstrations were textbook perfect, and his tactical knowledge was encyclopedic. By the end of the first week, he had established himself as the unofficial leader among the candidates, the person others looked to for guidance and the standard against which they measured their own performance. Sarah's performance was competent but unremarkable. She met every requirement without exceeding any of them, demonstrated adequate skill without showing exceptional ability, and completed every task without drawing particular attention to herself. Her scores placed her solidly in the middle of the pack, exactly where she intended to be. The living arrangements reflected the program's emphasis on building unit cohesion. Candidates were housed in a dedicated barracks facility with shared common areas and minimal privacy. The setup was designed to create the kind of close quarters environment that would reveal personality traits and leadership potential under stress. Morrison's room became an informal gathering place for evening discussions about tactics, strategy, and operational planning. His ability to synthesize complex information and present it in accessible terms made him a natural teacher. and other candidates sought out his perspective on everything from equipment selection to career advancement. He had the kind of charismatic intelligence that made people want to follow him, combined with enough genuine expertise to justify their confidence. Sarah's room remained largely empty, except for the few personal items she'd brought with her. Her duffel bag contained exactly what the packing list specified, nothing more and nothing less. The only personal touch was a small framed photograph that she kept on the knitstand, 3 people in civilian clothes, standing in front of what appeared to be a mountain landscape, their faces obscured by shadows and distance. The social dynamics that emerged during the first week followed predictable patterns. Morrison became the unofficial spokesperson for the group, the person who would approach instructors with questions or concerns on behalf of other candidates. A core group of high performers gravitated around him, creating an inner circle that set the tone for the entire cohort. Captain Jennifer Walsh, a Marine Corps intelligence officer with an impressive record in psychological operations, became Morrison's closest ally and frequent discussion partner. Her analytical mind complemented his tactical expertise, and their conversations often drew audiences from other candidates, seeking to learn from their exchange of ideas. Major Thomas Bradley, an Army Ranger with extensive experience in unconventional warfare, rounded out what other candidates began calling the leadership triumvirate. Bradley's quiet competence and practical wisdom provided a stabilizing influence on Morrison's more aggressive tendencies, while his operational experience in complex environments added depth to their strategic discussions. Sarah observed these developing relationships with professional interest, but remained outside the emerging power structure. She participated in group discussions when asked direct questions, but never volunteered opinions or sought to influence the direction of conversations. Her responses were thoughtful and accurate, but she never demonstrated the kind of innovative thinking or leadership potential that would elevate her standing within the group. The first major exercise took place during the second week, a complex scenario that required the candidates to plan and execute a simulated rescue operation in hostile territory. Teams were formed through a combination of instructor assignment and peer selection, with natural leaders emerging to coordinate the various elements required for success. Morrison was selected as the overall mission commander, a choice that surprised no one given his established reputation and demonstrated competence. His team included the other high performers, creating what appeared to be the strongest possible combination of skills and experience. Sarah found herself assigned to a support role in logistics coordination, responsible for ensuring that equipment and supplies would be available when and where the mission required them. It was exactly the kind of behind-the-scenes position that matched her apparent skill level and personality, important to mission success, but unlikely to generate recognition or attention. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The planning phase revealed the depth of preparation that Morrison brought to every challenge. His approach was systematic and thorough, incorporating contingencies for multiple failure modes and demonstrating the kind of tactical thinking that had made him successful in real-world operations. His briefings were clear, comprehensive, and demonstrated genuine leadership ability that went beyond mere technical competence. Sarah's contributions during planning sessions were practical and well-considered, but never groundbreaking. She identified potential logistical complications that others had overlooked, suggested minor modifications to equipment loadouts that improved efficiency, and asked questions that helped clarify operational requirements. Her input was valuable but not innovative, helpful but not inspired. The execution phase of the exercise took place in a training area that simulated the kind of challenging terrain and complex tactical environment that special operations forces regularly encountered. Multiple buildings, varied elevations, and simulated civilian populations created a scenario That required both careful planning and adaptive thinking when circumstances inevitably deviated from the original plan. Morrison's leadership during the exercise was exemplary. He maintained situational awareness across multiple moving parts, made tactical adjustments when unexpected complications arose, and kept his team focused on mission objectives even when individual elements encountered difficulties. His calm competence under pressure impressed both instructors and fellow candidates, reinforcing his position as the standout performer in the program. The exercise concluded with a successful mission completion and minimal casualties. Outcomes that reflected well on Morrison's leadership and the team's execution. The after-action review highlighted his effective decision-making, innovative problem-solving, and ability to inspire exceptional performance from his subordinates. Sarah's role in the mission's success was acknowledged but not emphasized. Her logistics coordination had been flawless, ensuring that the right resources were available at the right times. But such contributions rarely generated the kind of recognition that comes from dramatic tactical leadership. She had done exactly what was expected of her, nothing more and nothing less. As the second week concluded, the informal rankings within the candidate group had solidified into a clear hierarchy. Morrison occupied the top position by general consensus. His combination of technical skill, leadership ability, and personal charisma, making him the obvious choice for eventual selection as the program's distinguished graduate. The other high performers had arranged themselves in supporting roles around Morrison's central position, creating a leadership structure that felt both natural and effective. Their evening discussions had evolved into informal planning sessions for future exercises, with Morrison's insights and strategic thinking serving as the foundation for group preparation. Sarah remained exactly where she had started, competent but unremarkable, adequate but not exceptional. Her consistent performance had earned her a reputation for reliability, but reliability alone was rarely sufficient for advancement in special operations communities that prized innovation and aggressive excellence above steady competence. None of them knew, what the carefully maintained facade concealed, was that Sarah Chun had already demonstrated the kind of exceptional capability they were all striving to achieve. Her unremarkable appearance and measured performance were not limitations to be overcome, but tools to be employed. Weapons as precisely calibrated as any rifle or explosive device. The photograph on her nightstand showed 3 members of a Delta Force operational detachment that had ceased to exist 18 months earlier, when a classified operation in a country that officially had no American military presence had gone wrong in ways that the Pentagon was still trying to understand. The mission had required capabilities that existed nowhere else in the American military, skills that took years to develop and could only be verified through success in environments where failure meant death. 2 of the people in that photograph had returned home in flag-draped coffins after memorial services that their families were forbidden from discussing. The third had vanished entirely, her existence erased from official records and her identity buried beneath layers of classification that would remain sealed for decades. Sarah Chun was not her real name, just as her unremarkable background was not her actual history. But the skills that had made her one of Delta Force's most effective operators remained intact beneath the carefully constructed persona, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. She had learned long ago that the most dangerous enemies were often the ones that no one saw coming, and she had spent 18 months perfecting the art of being exactly that kind of threat. The Advanced Tactical Leadership Program represented an opportunity to return to the kind of work that gave her life meaning, but only if she could navigate the selection process without revealing too much about who she really was. The balance was delicate, demonstrating enough competence to earn a place in the program, while maintaining the fiction she was nothing more than a capable civilian contractor with relevant experience. As she prepared for sleep at the end of the second week, Sarah reviewed her performance with the same analytical precision she had once applied to mission planning in environments where mistakes were measured in body counts. So far, the deception was holding. Her carefully calibrated mediocrity was serving its purpose, allowing her to observe and assess while others competed for recognition and advancement, but she could sense subtle changes in the program's rhythm, indicators that suggested the real challenges were yet to come. The initial assessments had been designed to establish baseline capabilities and identify obvious weaknesses. The exercises that would follow would test limits, reveal character under extreme stress, and separate those who could perform under pressure from those who merely appeared capable in controlled environments. Morrison and his inner circle were preparing for those challenges with the confidence that came from proven success and recognized competence. They had established themselves as the candidates most likely to excel, most deserving of advancement, most qualified to lead the next generation of special operations forces. They had no idea that the greatest threat to their assumptions was sleeping quietly in a room down the hall, maintaining the fiction that she was exactly what she appeared to be while planning for the moment when that fiction would no longer serve its purpose. Sarah Chun had learned patience in places where impatience meant death, and she was prepared to wait as long as necessary for the right opportunity to remind everyone that appearances could be fatally deceiving. The third week brought a shift in the program's intensity that caught several candidates off guard. Colonel Washington had made it clear that the initial assessments were merely preparation for the real challenges ahead, and the new training regimen reflected that escalation. Dawn physical training now began at 0500 hours with combat conditioning that pushed even elite operators to their limits, followed by tactical simulations that required split-second decision-making under extreme stress. Sarah maintained her pattern of steady competence, completing every requirement without fanfare or failure. During the grueling obstacle courses that had been designed to test both physical endurance and mental resilience, she finished consistently in the middle third of candidates, fast enough to avoid attention, slow enough to avoid suspicion. Her technique was efficient rather than impressive, her endurance adequate rather than exceptional. Morrison continued to dominate every metric by which success was measured in the program. His obstacle course times were consistently among the top 3, his marksmanship scores remained near perfect, and his tactical innovations during simulation exercises drew praise from instructors who had seen decades of exceptional operators. More importantly, his ability to elevate the performance of others was becoming increasingly evident as other candidates sought his guidance and followed his lead. The whispered conversations that had begun during the first week were evolving into more open discussions about the capabilities and potential of various candidates. These assessments inevitably centered around Morrison's obvious excellence and the question of who else might be worthy of consideration for advanced positions. Sarah's name rarely entered these conversations, except as an example of adequate but unremarkable performance. Captain Walsh had become Morrison's most frequent discussion partner, their evening conversations in the common area drawing audiences from other candidates who wanted to learn from their exchange of tactical concepts and strategic thinking. Walsh's intelligence background provided analytical depth that complemented Morrison's operational experience, and their collaborative approach to problem solving was generating innovative solutions to the complex scenarios the program presented. The key to urban operations, Morrison was explaining during one such evening session, is understanding that the environment itself becomes your primary weapon system. Every building, every street, every piece of infrastructure can be leveraged to create tactical advantages that multiply your effective capabilities. Walsh nodded thoughtfully. The psychological dimension is equally important. Urban populations become intelligence assets or operational obstacles depending on how effectively you can manage their perceptions and responses. Hearts and minds isn't just a slogan, it's a tactical necessity. Sarah listened from her position near the window, where she was reviewing technical manuals with the same methodical attention she applied to everything else. The concepts Morrison and Walsh were discussing were sound, though their theoretical understanding lacked the kind of practical nuance that came from implementing such strategies in environments where the consequences of miscalculation were measured. In Body Counts. Major Bradley joined the conversation with his characteristic quiet competence. Environmental factors can't be separated from human factors. The best tactical plan fails if you don't account for how stress and fatigue affect decision-making. At the individual level, unit cohesion becomes the determining factor when everything else goes wrong. The group dynamics had solidified around these three as the program's informal leadership structure. Other candidates naturally gravitated toward their discussions, seeking validation for their own ideas or guidance on areas where they felt less confident. It was a pattern Sarah recognized from other training environments' natural hierarchies, emerging based on demonstrated competence and social influence. What made this particular hierarchy interesting was how completely it excluded her from consideration. She had become part of the background, a reliable but unremarkable presence who contributed when asked, but never initiated, who met standards without exceeding them, who maintained professional competence without displaying exceptional capability. Psychological assessments that marked the beginning of the fourth week were more intensive than anything the candidates had previously encountered. Individual sessions with military psychologists probed for character flaws, stress responses, and decision-making patterns that might predict failure under extreme pressure. The questions were designed to reveal not just what candidates thought about tactical problems, but how they processed information when overwhelmed, exhausted, or facing impossible choices. Sarah's session lasted longer than most, though not for the reasons the other candidates assumed. Dr. Catherine Reeves, a clinical psychologist with 20 years of experience evaluating special operations personnel, found herself intrigued by responses that seemed simultaneously too practiced and too authentic to fit normal patterns. "Tell me about a time when you had to make a decision that resulted in someone's death," Dr. Reeves had asked, a standard question designed to assess moral reasoning and stress tolerance. Sarah's response was immediate and specific. "Vehicle checkpoint. In a disputed territory. 3 civilians approaching our position after curfew, moving in a pattern consistent with suicide bomber tactics. Rules of engagement were clear, but the approaching individuals included what appeared to be a child. I had approximately 4 seconds to decide whether to authorize engagement or risk the entire team. What did you do?" "I authorized the engagement." The child was carrying 12 pounds of plastic explosive in a backpack designed to look like school supplies. 2 team members were wounded by shrapnel, but all personnel survived. Dr. Reeves made notes with careful precision. The scenario was plausible, the details consistent with operational realities, but something about the delivery suggested actual experience rather than theoretical consideration. Civilian contractors occasionally faced such situations in high-risk environments, but the tactical language and decision-making framework Sarah used were more sophisticated than typical private security backgrounds would explain. "How do you process the emotional impact of decisions like that?" Compartmentalization. The emotional processing happens after the tactical situation is resolved and personnel are secure. During operations, emotion compromises judgment, and compromised judgment gets people killed. The clinical detachment in Sarah's voice was professional and appropriate, but it carried undertones that suggested extensive familiarity with life and death decision-making. Dr. Reeves had evaluated hundreds of special operations personnel, and she recognized the kind of psychological conditioning that came from repeated exposure to extreme violence and responsibility. Meanwhile, the other candidates were beginning to express more open skepticism about Sarah's presence in the program. The conversations that had previously been limited to whispered speculation were becoming more direct as the pressure of evaluation intensified and the Competition for advancement became more explicit. Sergeant First Class Michael Torres, an Army Special Forces operator with extensive counterterrorism experience, voiced what several others were thinking during a break between evaluation sessions. "I'm just saying, we're all here because we've proven ourselves in real-world operations. We've all bled for this country, all earned our place through demonstrated excellence under fire." He gestured toward Sarah, who was sitting alone reviewing technical documentation with her usual focused attention. What exactly has she done to earn a slot in this program? What combat experience does she have? What operations has she participated in? We don't know anything about her background, except that she's some kind of civilian contractor. Staff Sergeant Lisa Hamilton, a Marine Corps reconnaissance specialist, nodded in agreement. "It's not personal, but this program is supposed to prepare leaders for the most challenging operations our military conducts. If she hasn't proven herself in combat, how can she be expected to lead others who have?" Morrison had been listening to these conversations with growing concern, not because he disagreed with the sentiment, but because he recognized that such discussions could undermine unit cohesion if they were allowed to continue unchecked. His leadership instincts told him that openly questioning another candidate's qualifications could create divisions that would damage everyone's performance. "Look," he said diplomatically, "we don't know what her background includes because that information is classified. The program administrators obviously had reasons for accepting her application, and those reasons might involve operational experience that we're not cleared to know about." Torres wasn't satisfied with diplomatic responses. If her experience was that significant, wouldn't there be some indication of it in her performance? "We're all pushing ourselves to excel in every evaluation, but she's just adequate, competent but not exceptional. That doesn't suggest someone with the kind of background that would justify a classified selection process." The tension was becoming more palpable as the fourth week progressed. Physical training sessions that had previously been characterized by mutual encouragement and professional camaraderie were developing an edge of competition that sometimes bordered on hostility. Candidates who had been supportive of each other were beginning to view their peers as obstacles to advancement rather than colleagues in a shared endeavor. Sarah remained outside these developing conflicts, but she was acutely aware of the changing dynamics. Her trained situational awareness allowed her to monitor multiple conversations simultaneously, track relationship patterns, and assess threat levels with the same precision she had once applied to hostile environments. The program was entering a phase where interpersonal conflicts could escalate beyond professional disagreement into personal antagonism. The tactical simulation that dominated the fifth week was designed to test leadership under extreme stress. Candidates were placed in command of simulated units, facing complex operational scenarios with multiple competing objectives, limited resources, and time constraints that forced rapid decision-making. The scenarios were based on actual operations, though the specific details had been altered to protect classified information. Morrison's performance during these simulations reinforced his reputation as the program's standout candidate. His tactical decisions were sound, his leadership style was effective, and his ability to maintain operational focus under pressure was exceptional. Instructors praised his innovative approaches to resource allocation and his skill at maximizing unit effectiveness despite challenging constraints. Sarah's simulation results were consistent with her overall performance pattern, competent, but unremarkable. She made tactical decisions that were tactically sound but not innovative, managed resources efficiently but not exceptionally, and maintained unit cohesion adequately but not inspirationally. Her simulated units completed their missions successfully, but without the kind of outstanding results that drew instructor attention or peer recognition. What the evaluation metrics couldn't capture was the subtle sophistication of Sarah's tactical thinking. Her decisions appeared straightforward because they were made with a level of situational awareness that eliminated obviously poor choices before they could be considered. Her resource management seemed adequate because she was working from experience with actual scarcity rather than simulated constraints. Her leadership appeared competent because she understood exactly how much authority to exercise without revealing capabilities that exceeded her supposed background. The psychological pressure was beginning to affect other candidates in ways that became increasingly visible as the week progressed. Sleep deprivation, competitive stress, and the constant evaluation were creating conditions where personality flaws and character weaknesses became magnified. Candidates who had appeared stable and professional were beginning to show signs of strain that affected their performance and their relationships with peers. Torres was becoming increasingly vocal about his concerns regarding the program selection criteria and the presence of candidates whose qualifications he questioned. His comments about Sarah were becoming more pointed and more public, creating an atmosphere where others felt pressured to either support his position or defend her presence. "We're supposed to be training future leaders of special operations forces," Torres said during one particularly tense evening discussion. "That means every person in this program should represent the absolute pinnacle of military excellence. There's no room for affirmative action or political correctness when lives are on the line." Hamilton supported his position with her own observations. "I've been watching her performance metrics, and there's nothing that suggests exceptional capability. Her physical training scores are middle of the pack. Her tactical knowledge is adequate, but not advanced. And she's never demonstrated the kind of innovative thinking that separates good operators from great ones." Morrison found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position as these discussions became more frequent and more pointed. His natural leadership instincts told him that unity was essential for group success, but he also recognized that the concerns being raised had some validity. Sarah's presence in the program remained unexplained, and her performance, while adequate, didn't suggest the kind of exceptional capability that would justify special consideration. "Maybe," Morrison said carefully, "we should focus on our own performance rather than questioning decisions that were made above our pay grade. The program administrators have access to information that we don't, and they're responsible for ensuring that every candidate meets the necessary standards." But even Morrison's diplomatic approach couldn't completely suppress the growing skepticism. The combination of intense pressure, competitive environment, and unexplained circumstances was creating conditions where rational assessment was becoming increasingly difficult to separate from personal frustration and professional jealousy. Sarah observed these developments with the same analytical detachment she had learned to apply to hostile populations and operational environments. Group dynamics under stress followed predictable patterns, and the current tensions were developing exactly as psychological conditioning had taught her to expect. The key was maintaining her established persona while avoiding actions that might escalate conflicts beyond manageable levels. The advanced marksmanship evaluations that concluded the 5th week provided another opportunity for candidates to demonstrate exceptional skill and for instructors to assess capabilities under stressful conditions. The course of fire included multiple weapon systems, varying distances, and environmental factors designed to test adaptability and precision under pressure. Morrison's performance was predictably excellent. His scores with rifle, pistol, and specialized weapons were consistently among the highest recorded in the program's history. His technique was flawless, his tactical adaptations were innovative, and his ability to maintain accuracy under stress was exceptional. Instructors praised his mastery of both familiar and unfamiliar weapon systems. Sarah's marksmanship scores were good, but not outstanding. She qualified expert with all weapon systems, but didn't set any records or draw particular attention to her technique. Her shooting was mechanically sound, tactically appropriate, and consistently reliable, but it lacked the inspired precision that characterized truly exceptional marksmen. What the scoring system couldn't measure was the effortless efficiency with which Sarah handled every weapon. Her grip, stance, and trigger control were so fundamentally correct that they appeared natural rather than trained. Her transitions between weapon systems were smooth to the point of being unconscious, suggesting muscle memory developed through extensive practice rather than recent instruction. The most telling moment came during the stress fire exercise, where candidates were required to engage multiple targets while navigating obstacles under time pressure. Most operators showed some degradation in accuracy as stress levels increased, a normal human response to elevated adrenaline and cognitive load. Sarah's accuracy remained absolutely consistent throughout the exercise. Her shot groups were identical, whether she was shooting from a stable supported position or while moving rapidly through complex terrain. The physiological indicators that affected other candidates, elevated heart rate, modified breathing patterns, minor tremors, were completely absent from her performance. Dr. Reeves, who was observing the marksmanship evaluations as part of her psychological assessment process, noted the unusual consistency with professional interest. In 20 years of evaluating special operations personnel, she had seen few candidates demonstrate such complete stress immunity. Even elite operators typically showed some measurable degradation under pressure, but Sarah's performance suggested neurological conditioning that went beyond normal training parameters. As the fifth week concluded, the informal rankings among candidates had crystallized into a clear hierarchy that everyone recognized even if no one discussed it openly. Morrison occupied the top position by universal consensus, his combination of technical excellence and leadership ability making him the obvious choice for distinguished graduate honors. The second tier included Walsh, Bradley, and several other candidates whose performance had consistently exceeded program standards across multiple evaluation criteria. Their technical skills were exceptional, their tactical thinking was sophisticated, and their leadership potential was clearly evident to both instructors and peers. The third tier consisted of candidates who were clearly qualified for program completion but were unlikely to receive special recognition or advancement opportunities. Their performance met all standards and demonstrated professional competence, but lacked the exceptional qualities that separated good operators from great ones. Sarah remained firmly in the middle of this third tier, exactly where she had positioned herself from the beginning. Her consistent competence had earned recognition as a reliable team member, but her lack of outstanding achievement in any particular area meant that she was rarely mentioned in discussions about exceptional performance or leadership potential. Psychological tension was reaching levels that would soon require resolution through either direct confrontation or administrative intervention. Torres and his supporters were becoming increasingly frustrated with what they perceived as unexplained preferential treatment, while Morrison and his allies were growing tired of defending decisions they hadn't made and couldn't fully explain. Sarah could sense the approaching crisis with the same tactical awareness that had once allowed her to anticipate enemy actions in operational environments. The social dynamics were approaching a tipping point where emotional pressure would overcome professional restraint, and when that happened, the carefully maintained balance she had sustained for 5 weeks would become impossible to preserve. Question was not whether confrontation would come, but when and in what form. Sarah had learned patience in environments where premature action meant death, but she could also recognize when tactical situations were developing beyond the point where passive responses remained viable. Her real identity remained concealed beneath layers of operational security that had been constructed by professionals who understood the importance of protecting intelligence assets. But operational security was only effective as long as the conditions that supported it remained stable. And those conditions were beginning to change in ways that would soon make continued concealment impossible. The program was entering its most challenging phase, where psychological pressure and competitive intensity would push every candidate beyond their established limits. For most of the participants, This represented an opportunity to demonstrate exceptional capability under extreme stress. For Sarah, it represented a potential threat to the mission parameters that had brought her to Fort Bragg in the first place. The next week would determine whether her carefully constructed persona could survive the escalating pressure, or whether circumstances would force her to reveal capabilities that were supposed to remain classified for the indefinite future. Either way, the comfortable anonymity she had maintained for 5 weeks was about to end, and the consequences of that revelation would extend far beyond the boundaries of the Advanced Tactical Leadership Program. The 6th week arrived with an announcement that changed the entire atmosphere of the program. Colonel Washington stood before the assembled candidates with the kind of grave expression that immediately commanded attention, his usual composed demeanor replaced by something that suggested the stakes had just been elevated beyond anything they had previously encountered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Washington began, his voice carrying across the briefing room with unusual weight, "what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels and will not leave this room. The exercise plan for this week has been modified to incorporate real-world intelligence that requires immediate assessment by personnel with your level of clearance and expertise." The silence that followed was absolute. Real-world intelligence meant that their training exercise would involve actual operational considerations, current threats, and potential deployment scenarios that could transition from simulation to reality. Without warning, this was the kind of evaluation that separated theoretical competence from practical capability under genuine pressure. The scenario involves a hostage rescue operation in an urban environment with significant civilian population density. The intelligence is current as of this morning. The tactical constraints are real, and your performance will be evaluated by personnel who may need to implement similar operations in the immediate future. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of operational awareness sharpening to levels she hadn't accessed since leaving Delta Force. Real-world intelligence met actual enemies, genuine risks, and consequences that extended far beyond program evaluation. Her training kicked in automatically, heightening sensory awareness and activating cognitive processes that had been dormant throughout her carefully managed mediocrity. Morrison's reaction was immediate and professional. His posture straightened, his expression became focused, and his entire bearing shifted into the kind of command presence that marked natural leaders under stress. This was exactly the type of challenge he had been preparing for throughout his career, and his confidence was evident to everyone in the room. Team assignments for this exercise will be based on demonstrated leadership capability and tactical expertise, Washington continued. Captain Morrison, you will serve as overall operation commander. Your team selection and tactical planning will determine the success or failure of this mission. The appointment surprised no one, but the formal recognition of Morrison's leadership carried weight that went beyond program evaluation. Washington was essentially declaring that Morrison represented the best tactical thinking available among the candidates, and that real-world operational success depended on his decisions. Morrison accepted the appointment with appropriate seriousness. "Thank you, sir. I'll need time to review the intelligence and assess team capabilities before making final selections. You have 2 hours to review classified materials and make your team assignments. The operation briefing begins at 1400 hours, and execution is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 0600. As the briefing concluded and candidates began dispersing to prepare for the most significant challenge of the program, the underlying tensions that had been building for weeks suddenly found focus and direction. This exercise would determine not just program rankings, but potential involvement in actual operations that could affect national security. Torres approached Morrison with barely concealed excitement. "This is what we've been training for. Real operational planning with actual intelligence. Finally, we get to demonstrate what we're really capable of." Hamilton nodded in agreement. "The team selection is going to be critical. We need operators who can perform under genuine pressure, not just training scenarios. Every position needs to be filled by someone with proven capability. Morrison was already thinking through the tactical requirements and personnel assignments. That would give the operation the highest probability of success. His mental calculations included technical skills, psychological stability, leadership potential, and compatibility factors that would affect team cohesion under stress. Sarah had positioned herself near the edge of the group discussions, maintaining her usual pattern of observing without actively participating. But her trained awareness was processing information at levels that went far beyond what her apparent background would suggest. Real-world hostage rescue operations required capabilities that existed nowhere else in the military, and she could already identify potential complications that the other candidates were unlikely to consider. The intelligence review took place in a secure briefing facility that required additional clearance verification and security protocols. Morrison and his selected team leaders were given access to satellite imagery, signal intercepts, and human intelligence, reports that painted a detailed picture of a complex tactical situation with multiple variables and significant potential for operational failure. The target facility was a 3-story office building in a dense urban area, currently occupied by an unknown number of hostiles, holding approximately 15 civilian hostages. The building's construction included reinforced concrete that would complicate both surveillance and tactical entry, while the surrounding area contained schools, residential buildings, and commercial establishments that created severe constraints. On acceptable approaches, Morrison studied the materials with the methodical thoroughness that had made him successful throughout his career. His analysis was comprehensive, his tactical thinking was sound, and his preliminary plans demonstrated the kind of sophisticated understanding that came from extensive operational experience. But even his exceptional capabilities were being challenged by the complexity and genuine risk factors involved. The key variables, Morrison explained during team leader discussions, are entry points, civilian casualties, and extraction routes. We need simultaneous access from multiple directions to prevent hostiles from executing prisoners, but the building configuration limits our options for coordinated assault. Walsh contributed her intelligence analysis expertise to the planning process. The human intelligence suggests internal layout modifications that aren't reflected in the building's original blueprints. We're potentially dealing with reinforced positions and prepared defensive arrangements that could complicate standard breach procedures. Bradley's unconventional warfare experience added another dimension to their tactical considerations. Urban hostage rescue in denied territory means we can't rely on external support if the operation goes wrong. Every piece of equipment, every contingency plan, every backup option has to be organic to the team. As the planning session continued, Morrison began making team assignments based on demonstrated capabilities and tactical requirements. His selections reflected careful consideration of individual strengths, operational necessities, and team chemistry factors that would affect performance under extreme stress. Torres was assigned to the primary assault team, his counterterrorism experience making him valuable for close-quarters combat in confined spaces. Hamilton received assignment to the perimeter security team, where her reconnaissance skills would be essential for maintaining situational awareness during the operation. Other candidates were distributed across various specialties based on their demonstrated competencies and tactical requirements. Sarah's assignment reflected her perceived capabilities and program performance. Morrison placed her in a support role responsible for communications coordination and logistical management, important functions that required competence and reliability, but didn't demand the exceptional skills needed for direct action elements. Chun, Morrison said, reading from his assignment list, "You'll handle communication coordination between teams and provide logistical support for equipment and medical supplies. Your role will be critical for maintaining operational awareness and ensuring Resource availability. Sarah accepted the assignment without comment, but internally she was calculating the tactical implications of being positioned outside the direct action elements. Support roles provided excellent situational awareness opportunities and allowed for maximum flexibility if circumstances required intervention, but they also limited her ability to influence operational outcomes if the primary plan encountered difficulties. The detailed planning session that followed Morrison's initial assignments revealed both the sophistication of his tactical thinking and the limitations of theoretical preparation when confronted with genuine operational complexity. His approach was methodical and thorough, incorporating multiple contingencies and backup plans, but it lacked the kind of nuanced understanding that came from actually conducting similar operations under hostile conditions. Sarah listened to the planning discussions with growing awareness that several critical factors were being overlooked or inadequately addressed. The building's internal configuration suggested defensive preparations that went beyond what the intelligence reports indicated. The civilian hostage count was almost certainly inaccurate, and the extraction routes being planned didn't account for likely enemy responses to the initial assault. But her role in the operation didn't include tactical planning input, and her established persona precluded offering suggestions that would demonstrate advanced operational knowledge. She was trapped by her own cover story, unable to contribute expertise that could potentially save lives without revealing capabilities that were supposed to remain classified. The operational briefing that evening brought all team members together for final coordination and assignment confirmation. Morrison presented his tactical plan with confidence and precision, outlining entry procedures, target assignments, communication protocols, and contingency measures that reflected careful consideration of available intelligence and operational requirements. His presentation was impressive, demonstrating command presence and tactical competence that justified Washington's selection of him as operation commander. The plan was sound, the assignments were appropriate, and the overall approach reflected sophisticated understanding of hostage rescue principles and urban warfare considerations. But as Morrison concluded his briefing and opened the floor for questions, the underlying tensions that had been building throughout the program suddenly found expression in ways that no one had anticipated. Torres raised his hand with an expression that suggested his question involved more than tactical clarification. "Sir, I want to ensure that every team member has the operational background necessary to execute their assigned responsibilities under genuine combat conditions." Morrison recognized the implication immediately, but his leadership instincts told him to address the concern professionally rather than allowing it to escalate into personal confrontation. Every assignment has been made based on demonstrated capabilities and program performance. I'm confident that all personnel can execute their responsibilities successfully. Torres wasn't satisfied with diplomatic responses. "With respect, sir, some team members haven't demonstrated the kind of proven capability that justifies inclusion in a real-world operation. We don't know anything about Chun's actual combat experience, and her program performance suggests someone who meets minimum standards rather than someone who exceeds operational requirements." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Everyone in the room understood that Torres was questioning not just Sarah's qualifications, but Morrison's judgment in including her on the team. The challenge was direct, personal, and delivered in front of the entire group in a way that demanded immediate response. Morrison felt the leadership burden settling on his shoulders with uncomfortable weight. His natural inclination was to defend his decisions and maintain team unity, but Torres's concerns reflected doubts that other team members shared even if they weren't expressing them openly. "Sergeant Torres," Morrison said carefully, "personnel assignments are based on comprehensive evaluation of capabilities and requirements. Individual background details may be classified beyond our clearance levels, but program administrators have access to complete files when making selection decisions. But Torres was past the point where diplomatic explanations would satisfy his concerns. The combination of competitive pressure, operational stress, and genuine worry about mission success had pushed him beyond normal military courtesy into territory where personal confrontation became inevitable. "That's not good enough," Torres said, his voice carrying across the briefing room with increasing intensity. "We're potentially heading into a real combat situation where people's lives depend on every team member performing at exceptional levels. I don't care about classified backgrounds or administrative decisions. I care about proven capability under fire." He turned directly toward Sarah, his expression combining frustration, skepticism, and barely controlled anger. "What operations have you actually conducted? What hostile fire have you been under? What gives you the right to be part of a team that includes operators who've bled for this country?" The silence that followed Torres's challenge was deafening. Every person in the room could feel the tension that had been building for weeks, suddenly crystallizing into a moment that would determine not just team composition, but the fundamental dynamics that would govern the operation. Sarah remained seated with the same composed expression she had maintained throughout the program, but everyone could sense that something fundamental had changed in the room's atmosphere. Torres's challenge had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, and the response would determine whether the team could function effectively under operational pressure. Morrison realized that his leadership was being tested in ways that went beyond tactical planning or operational competence. The team unity that was essential for mission success was fracturing along lines of trust, capability, and inclusion that threatened to compromise everything he had worked to build. "Sergeant Torres," Morrison began, his voice carrying command, authority that demanded attention. "Questioning team assignments in front of the entire group undermines operational effectiveness and violates basic military protocol. If you have concerns about personnel qualifications, those discussions should happen through appropriate channels." But Torres was beyond the point where military protocol could contain his frustration. Appropriate channels got her assigned to this program in the first place, and look where that's gotten us. We're supposed to trust our lives to someone whose qualifications nobody can explain, and whose performance suggests she doesn't belong here. Hamilton stepped forward to support Torres's position. "He's right to ask these questions. Real operations require real capabilities, and we haven't seen anything that suggests exceptional performance from Chun. Support roles and training exercises are different from combat situations where lives are on the line." The confrontation was escalating beyond Morrison's ability to manage through leadership and diplomacy. The team was fragmenting before the operation had even begun, and the unity that was essential for success was being destroyed by doubts and accusations that were becoming increasingly personal and hostile. Washington, who had been observing the team dynamics from the back of the briefing room, decided that administrative intervention was necessary before the situation deteriorated beyond recovery. His voice, when he spoke, carried the kind of absolute authority that immediately commanded attention from everyone present. "That's enough," Washington said, stepping forward with a command presence that filled the room. "This discussion is over. Team assignments stand as designated, and operational planning will proceed according to schedule." But the damage had already been done. The confrontation had revealed divisions and doubts that would affect team performance, regardless of how the immediate situation was resolved. Trust had been damaged, unity had been compromised, and the psychological preparation necessary for successful operations had been undermined by personal conflicts and professional jealousy. Torres wasn't finished. His frustration and genuine concern for operational security had pushed him past the point where even direct orders could contain his need for answers. "Sir, with all due respect, we deserve to know that every team member has earned their position through demonstrated capability rather than administrative preference or political consideration." The accusation was direct and unmistakable. Torres was suggesting that Sarah's presence on the team represented some form of preferential treatment that compromised operational effectiveness and endangered personnel who had earned their positions. Through proven capability under fire, Washington's expression shifted into something that suggested Torres had just made a serious error in judgment. "Sergeant Torres, you are questioning decisions made at levels far above your clearance and challenging the qualifications of personnel whose backgrounds you are not authorized to know. That constitutes insubordination and potentially compromises operational security." But before Washington could continue, before Morrison could attempt further diplomatic intervention, before the confrontation could be resolved through administrative authority, Torres made a decision that changed everything. "I want to see proof," Torres said, his voice carrying across the briefing room with absolute determination. "If Chun has the kind of background that justifies inclusion in this operation, let her prove it. Let her demonstrate the capabilities that none of us have been allowed to see." The challenge was direct, personal, and delivered in front of the entire team in a way that made backing down impossible for everyone involved. Torres had essentially demanded that Sarah prove her qualifications or be removed from the operation, and his challenge carried the implicit support of other team members who shared his doubts, even if they weren't expressing them openly. Sarah could feel the weight of every gaze in the room focused on her with an intensity that hadn't existed since her arrival at Fort Bragg. The carefully maintained anonymity that had protected her for 6 weeks was dissolving under pressure that made continued concealment impossible. Washington recognized that the situation had developed beyond the point where administrative solutions could restore operational effectiveness. The team unity necessary for mission success had been compromised, and the psychological preparation required for complex operations had been damaged by personal conflicts that were affecting everyone's performance. "Captain Morrison," Washington said, his voice carrying the weight of command decision, "I want you to conduct a comprehensive capability assessment of all team members. Every operator will demonstrate their qualifications for assigned responsibilities, and team composition will be adjusted based on actual performance rather than program evaluations." The order was clear and unmistakable. Everyone on the team would be required to prove their capabilities through practical demonstration, and those who couldn't meet operational standards would be removed from the mission regardless of their program standing or previous assignments. Morrison accepted the order with appropriate military bearing, but internally he was calculating the implications of conducting capability assessments hours before a potentially real-world operation. The timing was suboptimal, the psychological pressure was enormous, and the team dynamics had been damaged in ways that could affect performance regardless of individual competencies. "Yes, sir," Morrison replied. "I'll conduct individual assessments and make necessary adjustments to ensure optimal team composition." Torres had achieved what he wanted, a direct confrontation that would force Sarah to either demonstrate exceptional capability or be removed from the operation. His challenge had been accepted, the stakes had been raised, and the pretenses that had protected her for 6 weeks were about to be stripped away, under circumstances that left no room for continued deception. Sarah realized that the moment she had been anticipating and dreading had finally arrived. The careful balance she had maintained between competence and anonymity was about to be shattered by operational requirements that made continued concealment impossible. The question was no longer whether her real capabilities would be revealed, but how much she would need to demonstrate to satisfy the challenges that had been raised. The breaking point had been reached, and everything that followed would determine not just her position on the team, but the future of operational security. Measures that extended far beyond the boundaries of the Advanced Tactical Leadership Program. The mission that had brought her to Fort Bragg was about to collide with realities that no amount of planning could have anticipated. The Capability Assessment Facility was a specialized training complex designed for evaluating personnel under conditions that replicated actual combat environments. sound-dampened walls, variable lighting systems, and modular obstacle configurations allowed instructors to create scenarios that tested specific skills while monitoring performance through advanced observation systems. As Morrison led the team into the facility, the atmosphere carried the weight of careers and operational futures hanging in the balance. Washington had made the parameters clear. Every team member would demonstrate proficiency in their assigned specialties under stress conditions that matched operational requirements. Those who couldn't perform at exceptional levels would be removed from the mission immediately, regardless of program standing or previous evaluations. The stakes couldn't have been higher, and everyone understood that their military futures depended on the next few hours. Morrison began with the assault team members, testing their close-quarters combat skills, tactical shooting, and breach procedures. Torres excelled, his counter-terrorism experience evident in every movement as he cleared simulated rooms with precision and aggression. His technique was flawless, his tactical decisions were sound, and his performance under stress demonstrated exactly why he had questioned the presence of operators whose capabilities hadn't been proven under similar conditions. Hamilton's reconnaissance assessment showcased the specialized skills that had made her reputation throughout the Marine Corps: her ability to gather intelligence while remaining undetected, her precision with long-range weapon systems, and her tactical patience under extended observation conditions proved her value for perimeter security responsibilities. Her performance was exceptional by any standard, validating Morrison's assignment decisions. One by one, team members demonstrated capabilities that justified their selection for the operation. Explosive ordnance specialists showed mastery of complex charges and timing systems. Medical specialists proved competence in trauma treatment under hostile fire. Communication specialists demonstrated proficiency with encrypted systems and backup protocols. Every assessment confirmed that Morrison had selected operators whose skills matched operational requirements. Sarah watched these demonstrations with professional interest, noting technique variations and tactical approaches while mentally preparing for her own evaluation. Her communication coordination and logistical support roles would require different types of demonstration, but the underlying principle remained the same: prove exceptional capability or face removal from the operation. When Morrison finally called her name, the facility had grown quiet in a way that suggested everyone understood this assessment carried implications beyond standard evaluation procedures. Torres and Hamilton positioned themselves for optimal observation, their expressions combining skepticism with curiosity about what capabilities Sarah might actually possess. "Chun," Morrison said, consulting his evaluation checklist, "your assessment will cover communication systems proficiency, tactical coordination under stress, and emergency medical procedures. We'll begin with communication." Sarah approached the complex array of radio equipment, satellite communication systems, and encrypted data terminals with the same composed expression she had maintained throughout the program. The systems were military-grade hardware that required extensive training to operate effectively, but they were also tools she had used in environments where communication failures meant mission compromise and operator casualties. Her fingers moved across the control interfaces with practiced efficiency, establishing communication links across multiple frequencies while maintaining encryption protocols and managing information flow between simulated operational elements. Her technique was fluid and automatic, suggesting familiarity that went far beyond basic training requirements. "Frequency management during multi-team operations," Morrison said, introducing complexity that would challenge even experienced communication specialists. Maintained secure channels for 3 assault elements, 2 support teams, and command oversight while coordinating with external assets. Sarah's response was immediate and flawless. She configured the communication architecture with modifications that improved signal clarity and reduced electronic signature. adjustments that demonstrated understanding of operational security requirements at levels that exceeded standard military training. Her coordination of information flow was seamless. Her priority assessments were tactically sound, and her management of competing communication demands was sophisticated enough to impress Morrison despite his initial expectations. Torres, observing from his position near the monitoring station, began to recognize that Sarah's technical proficiency exceeded what her program performance had suggested. Her interaction with the communication systems showed unconscious familiarity rather than conscious competence. Muscle memory developed through extensive practical application rather than classroom instruction. The medical assessment that followed revealed additional layers of capability that didn't match Sarah's apparent background. Morrison presented her with trauma scenarios that required advanced medical intervention under simulated combat conditions, penetrating chest wounds, traumatic amputations, and complex bleeding that demanded immediate life-saving procedures. Sarah's medical technique was extraordinary. Her patient assessment was instantaneous and comprehensive. Her treatment priorities were exactly correct, and her procedural execution was precise enough to meet surgical standards. More significantly, her emotional regulation under extreme medical stress was complete. No hesitation, no visible stress response, no degradation in performance despite handling injuries that would challenge experienced military medics. "Where did you learn trauma medicine at this level?" Morrison asked, his professional curiosity overcoming protocol concerns. Sarah's medical skills were approaching those of military physicians rather than basic field medics, suggesting specialized training that wasn't reflected in her program documentation. Emergency medical training through various contractor assignments, Sarah replied, maintaining the cover story that had protected her identity for 6 weeks. But her response lacked the conviction it had carried earlier, and everyone in the facility could sense that something fundamental had changed in her demeanor. Hamilton, watching from the observation area, noticed details that others had missed. Sarah's medical technique included procedures that were classified within special operations communities, treatments developed specifically for wounds encountered in counterterrorism operations. Her familiarity with advanced trauma protocols suggested training at military medical facilities that civilian contractors rarely accessed. The final assessment component was tactical coordination under stress, a test that would require Sarah to manage complex operational scenarios while processing information from multiple sources and making real-time decisions that affected mission success. Morrison configured the simulation to replicate the hostage rescue operation they would potentially execute, complete with communication intercepts, surveillance feeds, and tactical updates that required immediate analysis and response. Sarah approached the tactical coordination station with visible reluctance, understanding that this assessment would require capabilities that couldn't be concealed or explained through civilian contractor backgrounds. The simulation demanded tactical thinking at levels that only came from actual operational experience in high-stakes environments. As the scenario began, Sarah's transformation was immediate and dramatic. Her posture shifted from civilian contractor to military operator. Her voice acquired command authority that hadn't been present throughout the program, and her tactical decision-making demonstrated sophistication that belonged in Pentagon planning rooms rather than training facilities. She processed multiple information streams simultaneously while coordinating responses that optimized tactical advantages and minimized operational risks. Her situational awareness encompassed variables that other operators would miss. Her contingency planning addressed complications that hadn't occurred to the scenario designers, and her resource management reflected understanding of logistics that could only come from managing actual operations in denied territories. Torres, watching Sarah coordinate the simulated operation with increasing amazement, finally understood that everything about her program performance had been carefully calibrated deception. Her tactical thinking was exceptional, her operational experience was extensive, and her technical capabilities exceeded those of most special operations personnel he had encountered throughout his career. But the most revealing moment came when Sarah began removing her outer jacket to access communication equipment that was positioned at different heights around the coordination station. The jacket had concealed more than just her physical appearance. As she moved through the complex coordination requirements, her shirt began to ride up slightly, revealing the edge of a tattoo that made several observers take sharp breaths. Morrison, positioned to monitor Sarah's performance from multiple angles, caught sight of distinctive artwork between her shoulder blades that was partially visible above her shirt collar. The design was intricate and unmistakable to anyone familiar with special operations iconography. A stylized eagle with wings spread across a skull and crossbones motif, surrounded by stars arranged in the specific pattern that marked Delta Force. Operators. The tattoo was beautiful artwork, but more importantly, it was authentic. Delta Force insignia were not available to civilian populations, were not replicated by commercial tattoo artists, and were not displayed by anyone who hadn't earned the right through successful completion of the most demanding selection process. In the American military, what Morrison was seeing represented operational credentials that exceeded those of every other person in the facility. Washington, monitoring the assessment from the facility's observation room, had access to classified files that other personnel couldn't review. As Sarah's tactical performance exceeded all expectations and the Delta Force tattoo became visible, he finally understood why her program application had arrived through channels that required special clearance. Approval. Sarah Chun was not a civilian contractor with relevant experience. She was a former Delta Force, with operational credentials that were classified at levels that prevented normal background verification. Her presence in the program represented intelligence community interest in special operations training development, and her performance during assessment was revealing capabilities that were supposed to remain concealed indefinitely. The tactical coordination scenario concluded with Sarah having demonstrated mastery of operational planning that exceeded anything the other candidates could achieve. Her performance was flawless, her tactical innovations were sophisticated, and her understanding of special operations principles was comprehensive enough to impress personnel who had spent decades in similar roles. As Sarah turned away from the coordination station, the movement caused her shirt to shift further, revealing more of the Delta Force tattoo to the assembled observers. The artwork was unmistakable to anyone with special operations experience, and its presence on Sarah's back answered every question that had been raised about her qualifications, while raising new questions about why such credentials had been concealed. Torres, staring at the tattoo with a combination of shock and recognition, finally understood that his challenges to Sarah's qualifications had been based on incomplete information. Delta Force operators represented the pinnacle of military capability, personnel selected through processes that eliminated all but the most exceptional candidates and trained to levels that exceeded normal military standards. Jesus Christ, Torres whispered, his voice carrying across the quiet facility with absolute astonishment. That's a Delta Force tattoo. She's fucking Delta Force. The silence that followed Torres's recognition was absolute. Every person in the facility understood the implications of what they were seeing, and the revelation recontextualized everything they had observed about Sarah's performance throughout the program. Her measured competence hadn't reflected limited capability, it had represented careful concealment of exceptional skills that exceeded everyone else's qualifications. Morrison felt his understanding of the past 6 weeks shifting dramatically as he realized that the quiet, unremarkable civilian contractor had actually been the most qualified person in the program from the beginning. Her tactical knowledge exceeded his own. Her operational experience included missions that he could only imagine, and her presence in the program represented capabilities that could revolutionize special operations training development. Hamilton, staring at the tattoo with professional recognition, began recalculating every interaction she had observed between Sarah and other candidates. The woman they had dismissed as inadequately qualified was actually the most dangerous operator any of them had ever encountered, and her restraint throughout the program now appeared as professional discipline rather than limited capability. But the most significant reaction came from Washington, who finally understood that the classified operation they were preparing to conduct would benefit from tactical expertise that existed nowhere else in the American military. Sarah's Delta Force background meant that she had successfully completed missions similar to the hostage rescue they were planning, and her experience could determine the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. As Sarah turned to face the assembled team members, her expression had changed in ways that reflected the end of her concealment strategy. The careful anonymity she had maintained for 6 weeks was no longer sustainable, and her demeanor now carried the kind of quiet authority that marked elite operators who had proven themselves under conditions that most people couldn't survive. "I suppose," Sarah said, her voice carrying a command presence that hadn't been evident throughout the program, "that explanations are now required." Washington stepped forward from the observation area, his expression combining relief with professional respect for capabilities that he had suspected but couldn't confirm until the assessment revealed them. "Miss Chen, or perhaps I should use your operational designation, your tactical expertise will be essential for the success of tomorrow's mission." The transformation was complete. Sarah Chen, the unremarkable civilian contractor who had struggled to meet program standards, no longer existed. In her place stood a Delta Force operator whose capabilities exceeded those of everyone else in the facility, and whose operational experience could provide tactical advantages that would determine mission success or failure. Torres, still staring at the tattoo with amazement, finally understood how completely he had misjudged the situation. His challenges to Sarah's qualifications had been based on assumptions about civilian contractors rather than recognition of elite military credentials that were concealed for operational security reasons. His skepticism had been justified. Incomplete information, but his conclusions had been wrong in ways that revealed his own limitations rather than Sarah's inadequacies. Morrison realized that his team composition decisions had been accidentally optimal, despite being based on incomplete information about his most qualified team member. Sarah's assignment to communication coordination and logistical support hadn't reflected her limitations. It had positioned the team's most capable operator in roles where she could provide maximum tactical advantage while maintaining operational flexibility. The revelation changed everything about the upcoming mission. Instead of incorporating a questionably qualified team member into a complex operation, they now had access to tactical expertise that could optimize their approach, dramatically improve their probability of success. Sarah's Delta Force experience provided capabilities that would transform the operation from a challenging training exercise into a mission with every advantage that professional preparation could provide. As the implications of the revelation settled over the assembled team members, the psychological dynamics that had dominated the program for 6 weeks suddenly inverted. The woman they had underestimated was actually the most qualified person present. The operator they had questioned possessed credentials that exceeded their collective experience, and the team member they had challenged could provide tactical leadership that would determine operational success. But the revelation also raised questions about why such exceptional capabilities had been concealed, what operational requirements had necessitated the deception, and how the mission parameters might change now that Sarah's actual qualifications were known to the team members, who would depend on her expertise for their survival. The breaking point had passed. The revelation was complete, and everything that followed would be determined by how effectively the team could adapt to tactical realities that exceeded their previous understanding of what the program represented, and what the upcoming operation would require. Washington's secure communication device buzzed with an incoming encrypted message, that would change the fundamental parameters of everything they had been planning. As he read the classified update, his expression shifted from professional concern to something approaching alarm. The hostage situation they had been preparing to address wasn't a training exercise. Based on current intelligence, it was an active operation requiring immediate deployment with real-world consequences that extended far beyond program evaluation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Washington announced, his voice carrying the weight of genuine emergency, "the situation has escalated. What we planned as an advanced training exercise is now a confirmed operational deployment. American civilians are in immediate danger, and this team represents the closest available assets with the necessary clearance levels and tactical capabilities." The silence that followed was profound. Every person in the facility understood that they had transitioned from candidates in a training program to operators preparing for actual combat deployment. The psychological pressure that had characterized program evaluation was being replaced by operational stress that carried life and death consequences for both team members and the civilians they were tasked to rescue. Morrison, still processing the implications of Sarah's revealed identity, realized that his leadership responsibilities had expanded beyond training evaluation to actual command authority in a hostile environment. The decisions he made over the next few hours would determine mission success or failure, in circumstances where failure meant American deaths and potential international incidents. But the most significant change was in how everyone viewed Sarah's role in the operation. Her Delta Force credentials transformed her from questionable team member to invaluable tactical resource, and the operational experience she brought to the mission represented capabilities that could determine success in ways that no amount of theoretical preparation could match. "Chun," Washington said, using her cover identity while acknowledging her actual expertise, "I need you to review Morrison's tactical plan and provide recommendations based on your operational experience with similar scenarios." The request was formal recognition that Sarah's expertise exceeded that of other team members, including Morrison, when it came to the specific challenges they would face in a real-world hostage rescue operation. Her Delta Force background included successful completion of missions that matched their current requirements, and her tactical input could optimize their approach in ways that would save both operator and civilian lives. Sarah accepted the assignment with professional composure, but internally she was recalculating operational parameters based on intelligence that was current, threats that were genuine, and consequences that would affect international security relationships. This was exactly the type of mission that had defined her Delta Force career, and her expertise would be essential for navigating complications that the other team members couldn't anticipate. As she reviewed Morrison's tactical plan, Sarah identified multiple factors that required immediate revision. The building's defensive configuration was more complex than the intelligence suggested. The hostage count was almost certainly incorrect, and the extraction routes that Morrison had planned would expose the team to unacceptable risks if enemy responses deviated from predicted patterns. "The primary entry point you've designated," Sarah said, addressing Morrison with the kind of direct professional communication that marked elite operator relationships, "creates a fatal funnel that will channel our assault team into prepared defensive positions. We need simultaneous breaches from unexpected angles that force the hostiles to divide their defensive focus." Morrison listened with the professional attention of someone who recognized superior expertise when he encountered it. Sarah's tactical recommendations were sophisticated. Her operational insights were based on actual experience, and her understanding of hostage rescue dynamics exceeded his theoretical knowledge in ways that would improve their probability of success. "What modifications do you recommend?" Morrison asked, demonstrating the kind of intellectual humility that marked effective leaders when confronted with expertise that exceeded their own. Sarah moved to the tactical planning display with the fluid confidence of someone who had conducted similar briefings in environments where tactical errors meant catastrophic consequences. Her approach to operational planning was methodical and comprehensive, incorporating variables that the original plan had overlooked and addressing contingencies that could determine mission success or failure. We need to establish overwatch positions that provide intersecting fields of fire across all potential enemy escape routes, Sarah explained, marking locations on the building schematic that offered tactical advantages Morrison hadn't considered. The civilians are being held in multiple locations, which means our assault timing has to be coordinated to prevent executions if any single team encounters unexpected resistance. Her tactical modifications were revolutionary. Instead of Morrison's frontal approach with limited backup options, Sarah designed a complex operation that attacked the problem from multiple directions simultaneously, created redundant rescue capabilities for different hostage groups, and incorporated extraction alternatives that could adapt to changing battlefield conditions. Torres, observing Sarah's tactical briefing with growing amazement, finally understood the extent to which he had misjudged the situation. Her operational planning was superior to anything he had encountered throughout his special operations career, and her understanding of complex tactical scenarios exceeded that of officers with decades of command experience. The timing coordination is the critical factor, Sarah continued, adjusting team assignments based on capabilities and tactical requirements that Morrison's original plan hadn't addressed. Each assault element needs to breach simultaneously to prevent the hostiles from consolidating defensive positions or executing hostages in response to initial contact. Hamilton, watching Sarah reconfigure the tactical plan with professional precision, realized that they were witnessing operational expertise at levels that existed nowhere else in the American military. Sarah's Delta Force experience provided tactical advantages that could transform a potentially disastrous operation into a textbook example of special operations excellence. Washington, monitoring the tactical revision process, understood that Sarah's expertise represented capabilities that the Pentagon had been trying to incorporate into special operations training for years. Her actual combat experience in similar scenarios provided insights that no amount of theoretical study could replicate, and her tactical innovations were advancing operational doctrine in real-time. As Sarah concluded her tactical briefing, the team assignments had been completely restructured to optimize individual capabilities and mission requirements. Morrison retained overall command authority, but Sarah's tactical expertise would guide operational decisions in ways that reflected her superior experience with hostage rescue operations. Torres, Sarah said, addressing the soldier who had challenged her qualifications hours earlier, your counter-terrorism experience makes you essential for close-quarters combat, but you'll be working with modified breach procedures that account for civilian locations and defensive configurations that standard approaches wouldn't handle effectively. Torres accepted the new assignment with professional respect for expertise he could now recognize and appreciate. His earlier skepticism about Sarah's qualifications had been replaced by awareness that he was working with an operator whose capabilities exceeded his understanding and whose tactical leadership could provide advantages that would determine mission success. The equipment selection that followed Sarah's tactical revision required modifications that reflected operational requirements beyond standard special operations loadouts. Her Delta Force experience included familiarity with specialized weapon systems, advanced communication equipment, and tactical modifications that could provide crucial advantages in complex urban environments. We need explosive charges with timer configurations that allow for coordinated detonation across multiple entry points, Sarah explained, selecting equipment that would support the simultaneous breach strategy that was essential for mission success. Standard communication systems won't provide adequate coordination for the timing requirements, so we'll need encrypted tactical networks that can maintain contact through building materials that interfere with normal radio frequencies. Her equipment selections reflected practical experience with operational requirements that other team members had only encountered in theoretical scenarios. Each piece of gear was chosen for specific tactical advantages that would support the complex coordination necessary for successful hostage rescue in hostile territory. Morrison, working with Sarah to finalize operational preparations, realized that his leadership role had evolved from independent command to collaborative coordination, with expertise that exceeded his own. The partnership was professional and effective, but it required intellectual humility that challenged his previous understanding of command relationships. The psychological dimension is as important as the tactical approach, Sarah said, addressing factors that Morrison's original plan hadn't adequately considered. Hostiles in urban environments respond to assault pressure in predictable ways, but those responses can be manipulated through strategic application of force that creates tactical advantages for rescue operations. Her understanding of enemy psychology was sophisticated and practical, based on operational experience that included successful manipulation of hostile responses to create opportunities for civilian rescue. This knowledge represented tactical expertise that could optimize their approach in ways that standard training couldn't provide. As the final operational briefing approached, the team dynamics had shifted completely from the hierarchical structure that had characterized the program to a professional collaboration that recognized actual expertise, regardless of official rank or program standing. Sarah's Delta Force credentials had established her as the tactical authority, while Morrison's leadership capabilities provided command structure and coordination. The transformation was most evident in how other team members now sought Sarah's input on operational details that they had previously handled independently. Her tactical expertise was being recognized and utilized in ways that optimized team performance and improved mission probability of success. Washington addressed the assembled team with the gravity appropriate for operators preparing for actual combat deployment. You are about to undertake a mission that will test every skill you've developed throughout your military careers. The stakes are real, the risks are significant, and the consequences of failure extend far beyond military considerations. But his final comments were directed specifically at the operational expertise that Sarah brought to the mission. The tactical plan you've developed represents special operations capabilities at the highest levels, and your coordination reflects the kind of professional excellence that defines successful operations in hostile environments. The acknowledgement was formal recognition that Sarah's contributions had elevated the operation beyond standard special operations capabilities to something approaching Delta Force effectiveness. Her tactical expertise had transformed the mission parameters in ways that provided advantages that would determine success or failure. As the team prepared for deployment, the power dynamics that had characterized the program were completely inverted. Sarah, who had been questioned and challenged throughout the training, was now providing tactical leadership that other operators recognized as superior to their own capabilities. Her Delta Force experience represented operational expertise that could optimize their approach and dramatically improve their probability of success. Torres, preparing his equipment with modifications that Sarah had recommended, finally understood how completely his initial assessment had been wrong. The operator he had challenged as inadequately qualified was actually providing tactical leadership that exceeded anything he had encountered throughout his special operations career. Hamilton, reviewing intelligence reports with annotations that Sarah had provided based on her operational experience, recognized that they were working with expertise that existed nowhere else in the American military. Sarah's tactical insights were advancing their understanding of the operational environment in ways that could prevent casualties and ensure mission success. The psychological shift was complete. The woman who had been underestimated and dismissed as inadequately qualified had become the tactical authority whose expertise would determine operational success or failure. Her Delta Force credentials provided capabilities that transformed the mission from a potentially disastrous challenge into a professionally executed operation with every advantage that elite preparation could provide. Morrison, conducting final coordination with Sarah, realized that his leadership had evolved from independent command to collaborative partnership with operational expertise that exceeded his own. The professional relationship was effective and mutually respectful, but it required recognition that tactical authority belonged with the operator, whose experience matched mission requirements. As the team moved toward deployment, Sarah's transformation from questioned candidate to tactical authority was complete. Her Delta Force expertise had been revealed, recognized, and integrated into operational planning that would determine the success or failure of a mission with genuine consequences for American civilians and international security relationships. The power shift had created a team structure that optimized individual capabilities while recognizing actual expertise regardless of program rankings or administrative decisions. Sarah's operational authority was based on proven capability rather than theoretical credentials, and her tactical leadership would guide decisions that could save lives in hostile environments that matched her previous experience. The mission that had begun as advanced training had evolved into actual deployment, with Sarah's Delta Force expertise providing tactical advantages that would determine success in ways that no amount of conventional preparation could match. Her concealed identity had been revealed, her superior capabilities had been recognized, and her tactical authority would guide operations that would test every skill the team had developed throughout their military careers. The mission launched at 0430 hours with precision that reflected Sarah's tactical planning and the team's professional adaptation to operational realities that exceeded their previous experience. 3 modified Black Hawks approached the target building through flight paths that avoided detection systems, while positioning assault teams for simultaneous deployment across multiple entry points. The coordination was flawless, the timing was exact, and the execution demonstrated special operations capabilities at levels that matched Delta Force standards. Sarah occupied the command position in the lead aircraft, monitoring communication feeds from reconnaissance assets while coordinating tactical adjustments that optimized their approach based on real-time intelligence updates. Her operational awareness encompassed variables that other team members couldn't process, and her tactical decisions were being implemented with precision that reflected professional respect for expertise that had been proven under actual combat conditions. Morrison, leading the primary assault element, found himself implementing tactical procedures that Sarah had developed based on operational experience that exceeded his theoretical knowledge. Her breach timing, defensive positioning, and coordination protocols were superior to anything he had previously encountered, and the mission was proceeding with effectiveness that justified every modification she had recommended. The building penetration occurred exactly as Sarah had planned. Explosive charges detonated simultaneously across 4 entry points, creating confusion and defensive division that prevented hostiles from consolidating resistance or executing prisoners. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating, forcing enemy personnel into reactive positions that eliminated their tactical advantages and created opportunities for systematic neutralization. Torres, leading his assault team through breach procedures that Sarah had specifically designed for his counterterrorism expertise, experienced tactical effectiveness that exceeded anything in his previous experience. Her operational planning had positioned his team for maximum impact while minimizing exposure to enemy fire, and the coordination between assault elements was producing results that demonstrated superior tactical thinking under genuine combat conditions. The hostage rescue proceeded with clinical precision. Sarah's intelligence analysis had correctly predicted civilian locations. Her tactical planning had positioned rescue teams for optimal access, and her coordination protocols ensured that extraction procedures proceeded without the delays or complications that typically characterized urban operations in hostile territory. Within 18 minutes of initial breach, all American civilians had been secured and evacuated to safe positions outside the building perimeter. Enemy casualties were significant while team casualties were zero, outcomes that reflected tactical planning at levels that existed nowhere else in American special operations capabilities. The mission was a complete success by every operational metric, but the most significant consequences weren't measured in tactical effectiveness or mission completion statistics. The operation had demonstrated Sarah's operational expertise in ways that would fundamentally alter how special operations training was conducted throughout the American military, and the implications of her revealed capabilities extended far beyond single mission parameters. Washington, monitoring the operation from the Tactical Operations Center, was already calculating the institutional changes that Sarah's performance would require. Her tactical innovations had produced operational effectiveness that exceeded established special operations doctrine, and her expertise represented capabilities that needed to be incorporated into training programs across all branches of military service. As the team returned to Fort Bragg with mission success confirmed and all personnel accounted for, the psychological dynamics that had characterized the Advanced Tactical Leadership Program were being reassessed at levels that extended to Pentagon leadership and intelligence community oversight. Sarah's concealed identity had been revealed under circumstances that demonstrated capabilities requiring immediate integration into operational planning at the highest levels. The debriefing session that followed mission completion was unlike anything that had previously occurred in special operations training programs. Instead of instructors evaluating candidate performance, senior officers were documenting tactical innovations that would become standard operational procedures for elite units throughout the military establishment. General Patricia Hawkins, commanding officer for Special Operations Command, had flown from MacDill Air Force Base specifically to conduct personal assessment of capabilities that her intelligence briefings had suggested but couldn't adequately describe. Her evaluation of Sarah's tactical performance would determine how Delta Force expertise could be integrated into broader military training without compromising operational security requirements. Miss Chun, General Hawkins said, using the cover identity that would be maintained for administrative purposes, your tactical performance during this operation represents capabilities that we need to understand and replicate throughout our special operations training programs. The recognition was formal acknowledgement that Sarah's expertise exceeded standard military capabilities and represented tactical knowledge that could revolutionize how elite operations were planned and executed. Her Delta Force experience had been demonstrated under actual combat conditions, and the results justified institutional changes that would affect military doctrine for decades. But the immediate consequences were focused on personnel who had questioned Sarah's qualifications during the program evaluation period. Their skepticism had been based on incomplete information, but their professional judgment had been proven wrong in ways that would affect their military careers and future advancement opportunities. Torres found himself facing professional evaluation that went beyond program assessment to fundamental questions about his capacity for accurate personnel assessment under operational conditions. His challenges to Sarah's qualifications had been proven wrong in ways that demonstrated limitations in tactical thinking that could affect unit effectiveness in combat situations. Colonel Washington's assessment was direct and unforgiving. Sergeant Torres, your inability to recognize exceptional capability when it was standing directly in front of you raises serious questions about your fitness for leadership positions in elite units, where accurate personnel assessment can determine mission success or failure. The evaluation was career-ending. Torres's advancement opportunities within special operations communities would be limited by documented failure to recognize superior tactical expertise. and his future assignments would reflect institutional concerns about judgment capabilities that had been proven inadequate under evaluation conditions. Hamilton faced similar professional consequences. Her participation in questioning Sarah's qualifications had been documented throughout the program evaluation period, and her failure to recognize Delta Force capabilities demonstrated assessment limitations that disqualified her from advanced leadership positions where personnel evaluation was essential for operational effectiveness. Staff Sergeant Hamilton, Washington continued, "Your reconnaissance training should have enabled you to identify tactical expertise at exceptional levels, but your evaluation of Chun's capabilities was fundamentally wrong in ways that suggest limitations in professional judgment that could endanger personnel under your command." Hamilton's military career trajectory was permanently altered. Her failure to recognize superior operational expertise would prevent advancement to positions requiring personnel assessment capabilities, and her future assignments would be limited to roles where her tactical limitations couldn't compromise unit effectiveness or mission success. The broader institutional consequences extended beyond individual career impacts to systematic changes in how special operations personnel were evaluated and training programs were structured. Sarah's revealed capabilities demonstrated that exceptional expertise could be concealed in ways that standard assessment procedures couldn't detect, requiring modifications in evaluation protocols that would affect military training throughout. The defense establishment, General Hawkins, announced institutional changes that would transform special operations training based on lessons learned from Sarah's program performance and tactical demonstration. Effective immediately, all advanced training programs will incorporate assessment procedures designed to identify exceptional capabilities that may be concealed for operational security reasons. The policy changes represented recognition that elite operators might maintain cover identities that prevented accurate capability assessment through standard evaluation procedures, and that training programs needed modification to ensure that exceptional expertise was recognized and utilized, regardless of administrative circumstances or background. Documentation. Sarah's formal appointment came with authority that exceeded anything previously granted to individual operators within training. Command structures. General Hawkins announced her selection as Director of Advanced Tactical Training Development, a position that would provide her with influence over special operations doctrine throughout the American military. Your operational experience and tactical expertise represent capabilities that we need to integrate into training programs across all special operations communities, General Hawkins explained. Your authority will extend to curriculum development, instructor training, and operational doctrine revision at levels that will affect how elite units are prepared for deployment. The appointment was unprecedented recognition of individual expertise and represented institutional commitment to incorporating Delta Force capabilities into broader military training without compromising operational security requirements that protected classified programs and personnel identities. Morrison's career trajectory was enhanced rather than damaged by the program outcomes. His professional recognition of Sarah's expertise when it was revealed, his adaptation to collaborative command relationships, and his implementation of tactical procedures that exceeded his previous experience demonstrated leadership capabilities that qualified him for advanced positions requiring intellectual flexibility and professional humility. Captain Morrison, General Hawkins announced, your leadership during this program and operational deployment demonstrated exactly the kind of adaptive command capabilities that we need in positions requiring coordination with classified assets and integration of exceptional expertise into standard operational procedures. Morrison's advancement to Special Operations Command staff positions reflected institutional recognition that effective leadership required capability to recognize and utilize expertise that exceeded individual knowledge, and his program performance had demonstrated exactly those characteristics under evaluation conditions that tested professional judgment and tactical adaptability. The Advanced Tactical Leadership Program itself was being restructured based on lessons learned from Sarah's participation and the institutional failures that had nearly prevented recognition of exceptional capabilities. Future programs would incorporate assessment procedures designed to identify concealed expertise, while maintaining operational security requirements that protected classified personnel and program parameters. Washington found his own career enhanced by recognition that his program administration had successfully integrated classified assets into training evaluation while maintaining security protocols that protected operational personnel. His advancement to oversight positions within Special Operations Command reflected institutional confidence in administrative capabilities that had been proven under complex circumstances. Colonel Washington, General Hawkins announced, "Your management of this program under circumstances requiring integration of classified capabilities with standard training evaluation demonstrates administrative expertise that we need in positions requiring coordination between training command and intelligence community requirements." The institutional changes extended beyond personnel consequences to systematic revision of special operations doctrine based on tactical innovations that Sarah had demonstrated during mission execution. Her operational procedures would become standard training protocols. Her tactical modifications would be incorporated into operational planning throughout elite units, and her expertise would guide doctrine development that would affect military effectiveness for decades. Dr. Reeves, whose psychological evaluation had identified inconsistencies in Sarah's background that suggested concealed expertise, found her assessment capabilities recognized at institutional levels that would affect how psychological evaluation was conducted throughout special operations communities. Her identification of indicators suggesting exceptional capabilities had been proven accurate, and her evaluation techniques would be integrated into assessment procedures designed to identify concealed expertise. But the most significant consequence was the transformation of military training doctrine that would ensure that future operators with exceptional capabilities would be recognized and utilized, regardless of administrative circumstances or cover identity requirements. Sarah's experience had demonstrated institutional limitations that could prevent optimal utilization of elite expertise, and the policy changes implemented would prevent similar failures in future training programs. The reckoning was complete, but its implications extended far beyond individual career consequences to institutional transformation that would affect American military effectiveness in ways that reflected recognition of exceptional capabilities that had been demonstrated under operational conditions. Sarah's revealed identity had catalyzed changes that would prevent similar failures, while ensuring that elite expertise was recognized and utilized regardless of administrative complexities or security requirements. The program that had begun with skepticism about Sarah's qualifications had concluded with institutional recognition that her capabilities represented tactical expertise at levels that exceeded standard military training, and that her operational experience could guide doctrine development that would enhance special operations effectiveness throughout the American military establishment. Torres and Hamilton's career limitations reflected institutional recognition that failure to recognize exceptional capability could compromise operational effectiveness in ways that endangered personnel and mission success, while Morrison's advancement reflected leadership capabilities that had been proven through professional adaptation to expertise that exceeded his previous experience. The Advanced Tactical Leadership Program would continue with modifications that incorporated lessons learned from Sarah's participation, ensuring that future programs could identify and utilize exceptional capabilities while maintaining operational security requirements that protected classified personnel and program parameters. The institutional changes represented recognition that elite operators might require assessment procedures that went beyond standard evaluation protocols to ensure that exceptional expertise was recognized, regardless of administrative circumstances. 18 months after the Fort Bragg incident, the transformation of American Special Operations training had become the gold standard for military educational programs worldwide. Sarah's influence extended far beyond the advanced tactical leadership, programmed to encompass doctrine development, instructor certification, and operational planning protocols that were being studied and replicated by Allied military forces across 3 continents. The Pentagon briefing room, where Sarah now conducted quarterly assessments, bore little resemblance to the modest facilities where her journey had begun. Floor-to-ceiling displays showed training effectiveness statistics from installations across the globe. Real-time communication links connected her with operational commanders in active theaters, and classified data streams provided continuous updates on mission success rates that demonstrated the practical impact of her educational innovations. General Hawkins, now serving as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, had made Sarah's training methodology a cornerstone of military modernization. Efforts that extended beyond special operations to conventional forces throughout all service branches. The tactical principles that Sarah had demonstrated during a single hostage rescue operation were being implemented in training programs that would affect hundreds of thousands of military personnel over the coming decade. The statistics speak for themselves. General Hawkins announced during the quarterly assessment briefing that had become essential reading for military leadership worldwide. Since implementation of the Etched protocols, our special operations casualty rates have decreased by 47%, while mission success rates have increased by 63%. These improvements represent the most significant advancement in military effectiveness since the development of precision-guided munitions. The Etched protocols had become shorthand for training methodologies that prioritized capability recognition over appearance assessment, tactical expertise over theoretical knowledge, and proven performance over administrative credentials. Military academies worldwide were incorporating these principles into their curricula, and officer evaluation systems were being restructured to prevent the kind of systematic oversight that had nearly excluded exceptional capabilities from operational utilization. Sarah's current position as Deputy Director for Global Military Training Development provided her with authority that extended beyond American military establishments to allied forces throughout NATO, Pacific partnerships, and coalition operations in multiple theaters. Her expertise was being utilized to standardize training approaches that would ensure interoperability between different national military systems while maintaining the tactical advantages that her innovations had demonstrated. The most visible impact of Sarah's influence was evident in the personnel who had graduated from programs incorporating her methodologies. These operators demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceeded previous standards while maintaining the kind of professional judgment that prevented capability oversight and recognized exceptional expertise, regardless of how it was presented or concealed. Colonel Morrison, now serving as Deputy Commander for Special Operations Training Command, had become one of Sarah's most effective advocates for implementing her educational principles throughout military training establishments. His professional evolution from program candidate to institutional leader demonstrated the kind of adaptive leadership that the Etched protocols were designed to develop and recognize. The fundamental insight that Sarah provided, Morrison explained during an international military education conference, is that exceptional capability often remains concealed beneath unremarkable appearances, and that military effectiveness depends on our ability to identify and utilize that expertise regardless of administrative circumstances or initial assessments. Morrison's own career trajectory had become a case study in leadership development through recognition of superior expertise. His advancement to senior command positions reflected institutional confidence in officers who could adapt to tactical knowledge that exceeded their previous experience while maintaining effective command, authority through collaborative relationships. With specialized personnel, the training facilities at Fort Bragg had been expanded into a comprehensive education complex that served as the primary development center for military instruction worldwide. International officers attended programs that incorporated Sarah's methodologies. Civilian contractors learned assessment techniques that prevented capability oversight, and advanced research programs developed new applications for principles that had been proven under actual combat conditions. Dr. Reeves, now serving as Director for Military Psychology Research, had developed assessment instruments that could identify exceptional capabilities that might be concealed for operational security reasons. Her techniques were being utilized throughout intelligence communities to ensure that classified personnel could be effectively integrated into training programs without compromising operational security requirements. The psychological indicators that suggest concealed expertise are subtle but detectable through proper evaluation procedures, Dr. Reeves explained during a classified briefing for intelligence community leadership. Our assessment protocols can identify exceptional capabilities while maintaining security measures that protect personnel whose backgrounds must remain classified. Her research had become essential for intelligence operations that required integration of elite personnel into conventional training programs, and her techniques were being utilized to prevent the kind of systematic oversight that had nearly excluded Delta Force expertise from operational utilization. The international impact of Sarah's innovations was most evident in coalition operations where different national military systems were required to coordinate tactical procedures and personnel assessment. Her standardized training protocols provided common frameworks that enabled effective cooperation between forces with different organizational structures and operational backgrounds. British Special Air Service, French Special Forces, German KSK, and Israeli Sayeret units had all implemented versions of the CHUN protocols that were adapted to their specific operational requirements, while maintaining the fundamental principles that prioritized capability recognition over appearance assessment. The results were coalition operations that demonstrated unprecedented levels of effectiveness and coordination. Major General Bradley, now serving as Commandant of the Army War College, had integrated Sarah's educational principles into strategic planning curricula that prepared senior officers for command positions requiring coordination with classified assets and recognition of exceptional expertise. His institutional influence ensured that future military leaders would be trained to identify and utilize capabilities that might be concealed for operational reasons. Strategic leadership in modern military environments requires intellectual humility and professional adaptability that allows commanders to recognize expertise that exceeds their own knowledge. Bradley explained during a senior leadership development seminar. The CHUN protocols provide frameworks for identifying and utilizing such capabilities while maintaining effective command authority. The educational transformation extended beyond military establishments to civilian institutions that prepared personnel for defense-related positions. Universities with military science programs, private security companies with government contracts, and international development organizations operating in hostile environments had all implemented training approaches that incorporated Sarah's capability recognition principles. The most profound institutional change was evident in how military personnel evaluation systems had been restructured to prevent capability oversight while maintaining security requirements that protected classified operations and personnel. Promotion boards, assignment procedures, and leadership selection processes now incorporated assessment techniques that could identify exceptional expertise regardless of how it was presented or documented. Torres, whose career had been permanently affected by his failure to recognize Sarah's capabilities, had become an inadvertent case study in the consequences of systematic assessment failure. His assignments to remote locations with limited advancement opportunities served as institutional reminders of the professional costs associated with capability oversight and prejudicial evaluation of personnel whose backgrounds weren't completely understood. Hamilton's similar career limitations reflected institutional recognition that reconnaissance specialists who couldn't identify exceptional capabilities represented systematic failures in assessment procedures that could compromise operational effectiveness. Her reassignment to positions with limited leadership responsibilities ensured that her evaluation limitations wouldn't affect future personnel assessment decisions. But the most significant legacy was evident in the operational effectiveness statistics that demonstrated practical improvements in mission success rates, casualty reduction, and tactical innovation throughout military units that had implemented Sarah's training methodologies. These improvements represented quantifiable evidence that her educational principles produced measurable enhancements in military capability, the classified operations that had benefited from personnel trained through Sarah's protocols included successful missions in environments that had previously challenged even elite units. Hostage rescues, counterterrorism operations, and unconventional warfare campaigns were being conducted with effectiveness levels that reflected tactical preparation at standards that had been established through her innovations. Sarah's personal office in the Pentagon reflected the institutional recognition that her expertise had earned. Commendations from military leaders worldwide covered one wall, while strategic planning documents that incorporated her tactical innovations occupied secure filing systems that required the highest security clearances to access. But the most prominent display remained the framed photograph of her original Delta Force unit, the reminder that had motivated her educational mission from its beginning. The congressional testimony that Sarah provided annually had become essential reading for defense appropriations committees and military oversight panels. Her assessments of training effectiveness, operational readiness, and tactical innovation guided legislative decisions that affected defense spending priorities and military modernization programs. The fundamental principle, Sarah explained during her most recent congressional appearance, is that military effectiveness depends on our ability to recognize exceptional capability, regardless of how it's presented. The costs of oversight are measured in operational failures, personnel casualties, and mission compromises that could be prevented through proper assessment procedures. Her testimony influenced legislative language that required military training programs to incorporate capability recognition protocols and prevented administrative decisions that might exclude exceptional expertise from operational utilization. These legal requirements ensured that the institutional failures that had nearly prevented recognition of her own capabilities couldn't be repeated in future training programs. The international military education conferences that Sarah now addressed regularly had become premier professional development opportunities for military leaders worldwide. Her presentations on capability recognition, tactical innovation, and educational methodology were being studied and implemented by military establishments that recognized the competitive advantages that her principles provided. The research programs that had grown from Sarah's initial innovations were developing new applications for capability recognition that extended beyond military training to intelligence operations, diplomatic security, and international development programs operating in challenging environments. Her principles were being adapted for civilian applications that required identification of exceptional expertise under circumstances where standard assessment procedures might prove inadequate. The memorial wall at Fort Bragg that honored personnel who had contributed to special operations development now included recognition of Sarah's educational innovations, alongside operational heroes whose combat achievements had advanced military capability. Her inclusion reflected institutional acknowledgement that educational advancement was as essential for military effectiveness as tactical excellence in hostile environments. But perhaps the most meaningful legacy was evident in the thousands of military personnel who had graduated from programs incorporating Sarah's methodologies and were now serving in positions where their tactical effectiveness reflected training that prioritized capability over appearance, expertise over credentials, and proven performance over administrative documentation. These operators approached personnel assessment with professional judgment that prevented capability oversight, recognized exceptional expertise regardless of how it was presented, and maintained institutional awareness that the most dangerous enemies were often those that no one saw coming until their capabilities were demonstrated under operational conditions. The Delta Force tattoo that had revealed Sarah's identity 18 months earlier had become an unofficial symbol of hidden strength throughout special operations communities. Personnel who had never served with Delta Force wore replica designs that honored the principle that exceptional capability often remained concealed until circumstances required its revelation, and that professional judgment required looking beyond appearances to identify the expertise that could determine operational success or failure. The training programs that continued to implement Sarah's innovations were producing military personnel whose tactical effectiveness exceeded previous standards, while maintaining professional humility that prevented arrogance and encouraged continuous learning from sources that might appear unremarkable but possessed expertise that could advance operational capability. The institutional transformation was complete, but its implications continued to expand as military establishments worldwide recognized that the Shun protocols represented fundamental improvements in how exceptional capability was identified, developed, and utilized. The legacy of a quiet woman who had been systematically underestimated had become educational doctrine that would influence military effectiveness for generations. Sarah's story had become more than individual achievement. It had evolved into institutional learning that prevented similar failures, while ensuring that exceptional expertise would be recognized and utilized regardless of administrative circumstances, security requirements, or initial appearances that might conceal capabilities essential for operational success. The true measure of her legacy wasn't found in personal recognition or career advancement, but in the operational effectiveness that her innovations had produced, and the lives that had been saved through training methodologies that ensured exceptional capability would never again be overlooked because it didn't match expected appearances or conventional presentations. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.